Okay, today we're doing front brakes, pads and rotors on a 2014 GMC Sierra 4x4, which is going to be the same as a Tahoe, a Suburban, Escalade, Chevy 1500 is basically the same thing. The lighter duty trucks, again, the 1500 series. So the car's jacked up on a jack stand as well. And first thing we're going to do is remove the caliper and turning the wheel in the opposite direction of the way you'll of the side you're working on is going to allow you to access the back of the caliper a lot easier. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the caliper itself, and we're just going to leave the carrier in place for now. We're going to remove the caliper and then compress the piston. And that should be an 18 or 19 mil. A 19. Actually, first, before I do that, while the brakes are still holding the wheel kind of, I'm going to take the rotor hold down bolt or screw, which is a T27, I believe. A Torx. No, that one's not a 27. It's probably a 30 then. Is it a 30? It's a 30. And just remove that screw. It shouldn't be on there hard. Look at someone. Good God. Someone destroyed a wheel bearing cap. I'm going to fill that with grease before I finish this job. I didn't do it, but I'm not leaving it that way, because grease or water can get into there and get inside and wreck the wheel bearing, the hub bearing. Oh my God, I can't believe what some people do. Now let's pry that out while we're here. Good Lord. I'm going to straighten that out. I'm going to bang that out with a hammer and straighten it out again, because inside here you're going to get water's going to get in there and it's going to wreck it. All you have to do is bang the dent out, for God's sakes. Who did this? Freaking animals. Anyway, back in a sec. I'm going to bang this. Okay, so I straightened that out as best I could and then greased the inner lips and inside the hub to keep any moisture from getting in there. And tap it in with a rubber hammer, and I'm going to it's not my truck, it's not something I did, but it's sitting in front of me and I'm not leaving it that way. Anyway, let's get back to this brake caliper. I believe this is a 19. Now, I'm not trying to tighten it. I am merely going tight first and then loose to break the rust out. And those should have had thread lock on them, which they don't. Anyway, we're going to pry the cow. We don't care about the brake spring or the rotor, so we're going to pry against it because we're replacing all this. Again, the pads are not really bad. This truck is doing a lot of towing, so he wanted a little better pad and rotor on here. I'm going to take one of these old pads off. See, there's quite a bit of meat left. There's probably 50-60% of these pads left, but they're just not doing the job stopping the truck. So I'm going to pull this pad out and use it to push the two pistons back in at the same time. The C-clamp. yes, my C-clamp is old and beat up from doing this for the last 30 or 40 years. God knows how old this thing is. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to work around the camera. Let me get this out of my way. And that's just going to evenly push both of those pistons back inside their bores, because they pushed out as the pads wear down, and they have to be pushed back when you put new pads on, or else they'll be sticking out too far. And a lot of times when you do this, I will take the loosen the bleeder screw on the back when pushing the pistons back in, but I don't trust this bleeder screw on this truck. It's a GM. I mean, look at the rust, look at the shocks exploding. 7 years old, but you know, anyway. So I'm going to set this caliper right there so it can't fall. I'm going to pull the other brake pad out. There's quite a bit left on those, but they're just not stopping the truck, and they're grooving like a bastard. These crappy pads. Spring clips. Now, the slider pins are slightly seized. This one's not. This one is. You might as well address these while they're on the vehicle. That should be a 19, I believe. Well, they're not that bad. A little crunchy. I'm going to pull them out anyway to check the boots on the pins. Grease is old. I'm going to clean this off and re-grease these. I'm going to use a wire wheel to get all the rust off of that. Do the same with the top one. That one came out nice and easy. But you can see the little bit of water got in there. The boots aren't bad on these. They're not ripped. The boots don't come in the kit, they come separately. I'm gonna spray some brake cleaner in there to get the rust and junk working and garbage out. And we'll take off the caliper carrier bolts. They should be, I think that's an 18. Again, someone used anti-seize, but not thread lock. Thread lock works as anti-seize, so you can. And the last thing you want is your brake bolts to come loose. If you use anti-seize, reduce the torque of the bolts by about 20%. So if they're going to be 100 foot-pounds, if these are supposed to be 100, and you put anti-seize on them, put them on to about 80 foot-pounds, or else you'll over-torque and stretch the bolts. Let's pull the carrier off. Dump the slime out. And using a wire wheel, I'm going to clean the area where the brake spring hardware goes. The little springy brake holders go, so that the new ones will go on there nice and tight, and because rust bubbles up and pushes them away, makes the pads catch. So I'm going to clean all those up and I'll be back in 2 seconds. No need for you to watch that. Okay, so I have the carrier cleaned at both ends where the, other way, where the spring hardware is going to meet. And now down the slider pin holes, I'm going to blast some lubricant penetrant, because it's also a water displacer, and make sure any liquid that's in there can get out. Dump that onto a cloth. Oh, I didn't wire brush the slider pins. 1 second. Okay, so there's the slider pin cleaned up. Let me move this down a little bit so you can actually see. And I'm going to pack. I'm using synthetic all-purpose grease. You can use there's synthetic brake grease, you can use regular grease. That's where the slider pin goes, and you just simply push it in. That is not very tight, is it? I don't like that seal. What is it like on this one? That one's better. I may have an extra one of these sitting in the garage from another GM I did a few years ago. I think there's still one left. Let me see if I can find one. Or otherwise I'll have to go to the parts store and get this. Is just going to let water back in, because this is not, the little round hole, it's not good enough. Back in a sec. Okay, this is why we never throw stuff away that we have no need for. And we become hoarders. I actually have one. I actually have two, so I'm going to replace both of these. And it should be a little metal. Oh, it's going to be a pain. I'll show you what the new one looks like. This may take a few minutes to get the old ones out. But it's a rubber boot with a metal collar on it, and the metal collar pushes down inside. And they're not exactly sticking proud of here, are they? They are not the easiest things to get out at times. So I'm going to pry these suckers out, and back in a few minutes. I'm just going to show you one of these coming out. They're in there pretty good. So I'm going to attempt to push down and then lever it out of the hole. If I can grab to the side of it. It's not thick metal. There we go. Pop. So I'm going to have to clean up these holes, and we'll push the new ones in. Back in a sec. Okay, so the two holes are cleaned out. And now the new ones. Where did I put them? There we go. I'm going to tap these in. They usually don't go in nicely. I usually don't just push in. I'm going to use a rubber mallet so I don't wreck the rubber boot. And where's number 2? There we go. Clean up the second pin. Sorry, I haven't already done that yet. I'm going to grease both those pinholes. You should go in, and if the boot's sealing nicely, it should come up with the pin. See how it pulls up with it? And that one wasn't before, the pin was just pulling out of it. There we go. And pull the pins out, put a little bit more grease in. Okay, move this camera back up, and let's just pull this old rotor off. Oh, frickin' heavy. And we're going to clean up the face of the hub where the rotor meets, so it's a nice smooth surface. Again, with a wire wheel on a grinder or a drill. This wire wheel's almost had it. Look at Always wear eye protection when you're using one of these. If you've had one of these come out at high speed into your eyeball, I'm speaking from experience. Trust me, it's not fun. Never put one of these on a high-speed grinder either. I'm just going to use some silver antifreeze, anti-seize, you can use copper, whatever, and I'm going to put some in that little hole where the hold down screw is for the rotor, because you don't want that sucker seizing. Oh, I'm running out. These brushes never reach the bottom of these things, you notice? The brush is always like 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters off the bottom of the container. You can never scoop it all out. Okay, I'll be back in a second with our new rotor. Okay, make sure you note where the little threaded hole is and match that up on the rotor. With the chamfered hole. I'm going to attempt to locate the locator pin. What did I do with it? Where did you go? Oh, back in 1 second. That attempted to escape from me. Now this is not going on tight. You are not cramming this on there. It's not holding anything in place. It's not holding the rotor in place. It's just keeping it from basically flat to the hub. That's all it's doing. So you're not going to tighten it. You're just going to get it on there and snug it. That's about it. Brake cleaner, both sides, front and back. And let me grab a shop towel to clean that off. 1 sec. So from the factory, most rotors come coated in oil to keep them from rusting. And even though we haven't really touched these, there is an oily residue coming off. And that will stick itself into your brake pads and keep them from functioning properly. And that's not what we want. And you do not have to wipe off the brake cleaner. You can just leave it to evaporate. So now we're going to take our carrier, and it goes, oops, in this direction with the pins facing backwards. I don't know if you can see or not. Let's move you. And oh, where's my... Now I'm going to clean this anti-seize out of here, out of these carrier bolts. Back in one sec. Okay, so here's the caliper carrier, and I put blue thread lock on. Cannot get all the old anti-seize off, it just doesn't come off. Just get the bolts started in the holes first. Sorry if this sounds simplistic to a lot of you guys, but this is for people who don't know how to do it mostly. For other guys, it's just specs. But anyway, this mini impact is probably 150, it's 220 on its top setting. I'm going to put it on number 2. These are 170 foot-pounds, these bolts here, and this will not exceed that. So I'm just going to tighten it initially with that. To change to a torque wrench set to 170 foot-pounds, which I'm reducing by 10 foot-pounds just because there's still some anti-seize on there, which makes the bolts slip a little bit. It's torque specs are for dry bolts. So when you add oil to a bolt, your torque specs lower. $170. Okay, we're getting there. Let's move you a little closer so you can see this. Now we're going to put the brake disc hardware on. And where's the other? There we go. These are the same top and bottom. See the little spacer there? That goes in between. You know, that's going to keep it from being too tight side to side. So back first, like this end first, then push down. Same with the top. Make sure these two little teeth are in between there. You don't want these springs hitting the side of the rotor. And that keeps them centered in there. GM calipers just rot away. God. Anyway. Wow. That's ridiculous. These have just over the years rounded themselves to nothing. They should be a little more squared off than that. Anyway, they're not. Okay. Brake pads. Squealer. See See this little thing, the brake wear indicator or the brake squealer will always be on the piston side of the caliper. So whichever side your piston is on, if you've got a 4-piston caliper, it can be on either side. If you've just got pistons on the back, which is 90% of the calipers on the road, squealer on the back, because the piston side will wear down faster. Do not push it down on these springs here. They hold the pads out. See, they go that way. And this is usually one of the most difficult parts in putting them in, because the hardware's just got no room. Oh, those slowed in nice. Okay. And generally you would grease these, but since these are coated, according to the box, these are coated and no additional grease is necessary, so I'm not greasing these. On most caliper hardware, you would put grease where the ears of the pad touch that, so that they don't get stuck and they slide back and forth nicely. Because if they get stuck, your brake pads wear out. That was just that little piece of the spring clip was kind of pushed in, and I needed to pull it out a little tiny bit. Okay, those are in there. I'm going to use a little bit of brake disc quieter that keeps them from squealing, where the fingers of the outer caliper and where the pistons touch. That's what these are. These are anti-squeal shims. They work, but to make them work a little bit better, because you get vibrations, metal to metal vibrations cause squealing, you can use grease. You can use disc brake quiet, which is what this stuff is, and it just goes on a very thin layer and stops metal to metal rubbing, which causes that squealing. Uh-oh, I'm running out. It seems to be anyway. Oh, maybe not. Again, it's just a little thin layer. And the same on the back where the two pistons touch the pad in the back. Again, don't get this on the pad surface. It's not for the pads. Now, because of the grease in there, these are slightly hydraulically locked. I'm going to push them to pop the air out, because we're going to need these in as far as they can go. Just kind of burp, squeeze the little rubber so that the air that's trapped in there burps out, and they go in properly. Okay, now we're going to take our caliper, make sure that the hose doesn't get kinked up, which is very easy to do. And then we're going to do one side first. We're going to get this bottom part over the pin, slide the caliper over top of the pads. Oh, you popped out a little bit, didn't you? Okay, we'll put the top in first then. Ugh. Okay, I'm going to pull this off and show you what happened. Set this up here. You can see a little bit of silver there. That dust boot, the metal part that pushes into the carrier, has popped out a little bit. It wasn't seated properly. I didn't seat it properly, possibly. So So it's not going to let the pin go in far enough to get the caliper on. There we go. Let's try that again. There we go. And check top and bottom to make sure the pin's under and the rubber is not pinched. Oops. The rubber's not pinched between the caliper and the carrier, which it's not. Now we'll take our two. We are just about done. How do I not move like 2 feet from one spot and manage to lose 2 bolts? Anyway, these are again cleaned off. I cleaned them off when I cleaned the carrier bolts, but all of the Loctite will not come off of these, or the Loctite, sorry, the Permatex. So I put a little bit of thread locker on, and these should be, I believe factory spec is about 75 foot-pounds or 70 foot-pounds. So I'm going to put them on at around 60, since there is anti-seize on there. And were those 19s or those 18s? Anybody remember? I sure don't. So anyway, I'm going to tighten these and torque these to 60 foot-pounds. I believe these were 19s. The carriers were 18s. Adjust the torque wrench to 60. Which is way down from 160. Move you back. Now, if your bolts won't tighten, you'll have to get a 19mm wrench in on those little bolts inside, which is not easy to do. Generally, these do just tighten on their own. Let's hope. Just getting a wrench in there is a pain. Good. Whoops, slip, sorry. Everybody okay? Okay. And that's about it. We're going to check the level of the fluid in the brake master cylinder, but because the difference in pads, again, these pads were not worn out all that much. The brake fluid level will not have really changed from the, I mean, those pistons only pushed back about 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters, so there won't be much change, if any, in the level in the master cylinder. And just going to spray a little bit of brake cleaner on here to make sure that I didn't touch anything while we were doing this. Back and front. And we are good to go. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this helped somebody. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps me. Thanks a lot.